I'm the real daughter of a wealthy family. But my boyfriend is a fake young master. In my previous life, I was determined to get engaged to the fake young master and didn't even look at the real young master. But later, the fake young master pushed me into the hands of the kidnappers for the sake of his biological sister. And I was humiliated to death. It was the real young master who knelt on the ground, dragging his disabled legs, and begged them to spare me. Reborn. I stayed by the real young master's side. And no one could drive me away. I want to see how deep the feelings of this silent and forbearing man are for me. I was reborn the day before Phoenix was brought back. After school, I rushed back to the Phoenix family with Traitor. The first thing I saw when I entered the door was Phoenix. And my breath involuntarily became a little lighter. Phoenix was wearing a thin white shirt and sitting quietly in a wheelchair, with a cold expression, like a cold ray of sunlight in winter. Phoenix's father and mother were standing opposite him, looking embarrassed. They didn't know how to get along with their son who had been separated from them for 18 years. Daisy, the daughter of the Phoenix family, couldn't accept this fact even more and stood far away with an unhappy expression. I quietly looked at Phoenix, and a slight tingling pain came from my heart. It seemed to be reminding me of the fact that I had been reborn. Phoenix. We meet again. I couldn't help but smile, and my eyes became a little moist. In my previous life, it was this man who couldn't even stand up himself, yet he humbly prostrated himself on the ground to beg the bad guys to spare me. Obviously, having fulfilled wisely, he was the real young master who had suffered so much. But in his own home, he seemed like an out-of-place existence and was disliked by everyone. No one could get into his heart. So until I died, I didn't know how he could break his own pride for me. When Daisy saw Traitor, she immediately ran over with a smile and took his arm. Brother, you're back. Perhaps I should call him Traitor now. After all, his biological father's surname is Zhang. There was anger in Daisy's delicate voice as she said to Traitor, "Are Mom and Dad kidding me? They suddenly brought back a cripple and said he's my brother. What a joke." Traitor opened his mouth, his voice a bit bitter, and forced a smile. "Daisy, he's really your brother." Phoenix's mother said coldly, "Daisy, don't talk about your brother like that. It's impolite. Apologize to your brother." "I don't have such a brother." Daisy turned her head angrily. After all, she doted on her daughter, and Phoenix's mother didn't intend to force her to apologize to Phoenix. She pulled Traitor in front of Phoenix and gently introduced the two of them. Traitor smiled slightly, with elegant manners. "Hello, Phoenix. Welcome home." Phoenix didn't even lift his eyelids and regarded him as if he were the heir. The atmosphere was delicate for a moment. Daisy widened her eyes. "Mom, look at his attitude. Brother, don't pay attention to him. There's something wrong with this guy." Traitor's expression was a bit downcast. Phoenix's mother was silent for 2 seconds and then spoke. "Traitor, Mom and Dad don't plan to drive you away. Anyway, you're the child we raised. If you want, we'll recognize you as our adopted son. And you can still live in our house as before." Daisy jumped up and cheered. "Great. Brother is still my brother. That's more like it." Traitor smiled. "Thank you, Mom." Looking at the harmonious scene of this family, I just felt it was an eyesore. They must not have asked Phoenix's opinion. That's right. How could a cold and taciturn son, who was like a stranger compared to the adopted son who had been with them for 18 years? I put away my thoughts, walked up to Phoenix, and smiled as I stretched out my hand to him. "Hello. My name is Echo. I'm the childhood sweetheart who grew up with Traitor." I saw that Phoenix's dark eyes slowly lifted and looked at me. It was the first time I looked into his eyes at such a close distance. Those deep eyes made me feel even sadder. How deep were the feelings this serious man had hidden in his heart for me? A hand with distinct knuckles stretched out in front of me, and I heard his slightly hoarse voice. "Hello. In the garden." Traitor lowered his eyes and his tone was indescribably pitiful. Echo. I have nothing left." Looking at this former favorite of heaven in front of me, all I felt in my heart was hatred. In my previous life, his biological sister was kidnapped, and the kidnappers demanded money. At that time, Traitor's identity was awkward. and it was not appropriate for him to ask the Phoenix family for money again. So he could only turn to me for help. I went with him and negotiated with the kidnappers in the capacity of the daughter of the Echo family, saying that no matter how much money they wanted, I could give it to them. The kidnappers released his sister but caught me. They not only demanded money from my family but also humiliated me. And Traitor ignored my heart-eating cries and rushed down the mountain with his sister in a hurry. I was stripped naked and thrown on the ground. And there was no piece of unbruised flesh on my body. Just when I was in despair, I heard a familiar angry voice, "Let her go." I looked at the man who suddenly appeared in disbelief, and it seemed that something in my heart cracked. Phoenix was sitting in a wheelchair. His usually cold face cracked little by little. His pupils shrank slightly, and his gaze was sharp and resentful. The kidnappers laughed wildly. "Yo! One just left. And here comes another one." Echo really attracts men's attention. From my hazy vision, I saw Phoenix suddenly fall off the wheelchair. He couldn't kneel, so he could only lie on the ground. The spine that was always straight in the past was so low that it seemed to sink into the desk that day. "Please. Let her go. I'm the eldest son of the Phoenix family. No matter how much money you want, my family can give it to you. Or, if you don't want money but want a life, you can take my life. I just beg you not to hurt her." He was so humble, carefully begging for me, hoping that they would show mercy and let me go. My tears couldn't help welling up. At that moment, I secretly thanked him in my heart and also felt ashamed of myself. When he was in the Phoenix family, I didn't treat him well. But when I was humiliated, only he knelt down and pleaded for me. "Phoenix, hadn't så felt my sigh. I don't deserve you treating me like this." I bit my tongue and committed suicide. And blood spilled from the corner of my mouth. The kidnapper panicked and forced me to open my mouth. "Boss. This woman bit her tongue. That kid surnamed John only said to put on a show. What should we do now?" I was stunned. I never expected that this was a good show arranged by Traitor. In my last glimpse, I saw Phoenix's lost and dejected face. He pulled out a dagger and stabbed the nearest kidnapper fiercely. The kidnappers knew they had killed someone and fled in a hurry. Phoenix crawled little by little to my side and took off his own clothes to wrap around me. He quietly held my breathless body and sat on the ground for a long time. Then, muttered a low sigh. Like a child, he sobbed and his face was covered with tears. I closed my eyes and turned off the images flashing in my mind like a silent movie. Forcibly suppressing the urge to slap Traitor, I pinched red marks on my palm. And on the surface, I still had to calmly comfort him. "Who said that? As long as you want, you'll always be the young master of the Phoenix family." Traitor said dejectedly, "An adopted son is not a biological one after all. Sooner or later, Phoenix will definitely find a way to drive me away." He looked at me with burning eyes. "Echo. I only have you. Be my girlfriend." He said the same thing to me in my previous life. At that time, I pitied him because of the great changes in his life. And I agreed on an impulse. After that, he kept brainwashing me and said a lot of bad things about Phoenix. I also became more and more disgusted with Phoenix. Since Phoenix came to this family, he hasn't felt happy for a single day. Among them, Traitor has played a role in fueling the flames behind the scenes. Phoenix's short and unfortunate life is inseparable from everyone in the Traitor family and the Phoenix family. Of course, it also includes me. I said in a cold tone, "I'm not interested in a relationship. I want to be beautiful alone. Don't bother me. You, the fake young master, are getting too pushy. You still want to be my boyfriend? You don't stand a chance." Phoenix transferred to our school. When he appeared at the school gate in a wheelchair, many classmates cast strange looks at him. Our school isn't a school for the disabled. Did he go to the wrong place? Keep your voice down. Do you know who he is? He's the real young master that the Phoenix family brought back. What are you afraid of? Can he eat me? Look at him. How can he compare to Traitor? That's right. Anyway, heading fulfilled wide session. Traitor was raised by the Phoenix family according to the standards of a family heir for 18 years. Phoenix grew up in his adoptive father's auto repair shop since he was a child. He's not from the same world as us. I think if he's sensible, He should just be an invisible person in the Phoenix family, and not overestimate himself and compete with Traitor for favor. Phoenix had no expression on his face. His fingers resting on the wheels of the wheelchair gradually clenched tightly, and his veins were exposed. He didn't look at anyone and lowered his head to roll his wheelchair into the school gate. Traitor leisurely got out of the back seat, causing a group of girls to exclaim in a low voice, "Traitor is so handsome. He really looks more like a young master than Phoenix." Traitor was born with the life of a young master. Otherwise, do you think anyone could be picked up and raised by the Phoenix family? He's not their biological child. But he's more like one. Stop daydreaming about Traitor. He has an engagement with Echo. That's true. Although the real young master is here now. After all, it was Traitor who grew up with Echo. Their relationship will definitely not change. Traitor also saw me. He deliberately stopped and waited for me. And a gentle smile appeared on his face. "Echo. Good morning." I twitched the corner of my mouth. "Morning." After that, I ignored the hand he stretched out to me and walked straight ahead. "Phoenix. Good morning." I walked up to Phoenix and greeted him with a smile. Phoenix raised his eyes and looked at me, then retracted his gaze. He didn't answer, but I saw his fingers curl up slightly. "Daisy. Who got out of the car last?" snorted Echo. "You're really a snob. You're already getting friendly with the real young master. But it's not good for you to neglect my brother like this. Is it?" I smiled coolly. "What's wrong? Do you have an opinion if I make a friend, Daisy?" "Enough, Daisy," Traitor said lightly. Daisy gave me a glare, turned her head away, and didn't say anything more. Phoenix closed his eyes and said in a low voice, "Echo. You. Stay away from me." I raised my eyebrows, and my tone softened a bit. "Are you driving me away? Can't I be friends with you?" Phoenix's breathing stagnated. From my angle, I could see the shadow cast by his long eyelashes under his eyelids. "Can't you hear what they're saying? Is it something to be proud of to be friends with me?" His voice was hoarse, full of self-mockery. My heart ached, and I said seriously, "You're very good, Phoenix. You're not at fault. It's those people who talk nonsense that are wrong. But why should we care about what those irrelevant people say? Instead of that, you might as well think about how to make new friends you like." This Friday evening, the Phoenix family held a grand banquet to announce to the outside world that they had found their biological son, and also officially adopted Traitor as their foster son. Traitor and Daisy stood under the spotlight, as close as can be, just like real siblings. And they talked with the congratulatory honored guests with ease. Phoenix disappeared after making a brief appearance. Originally, having fulfilled l'âme sacrée, he should have been the protagonist of today's banquet. I walked over and smiled slightly. "Daisy. I really envy you. Now you have two brothers." I don't recognize Phoenix as my brother at all. I don't know him well at all. I only have Traitor as my brother," Daisy said angrily. I squinted my eyes, and my expression turned cold. This little girl is still stubbornly living in her own world. Obviously, having fulfilled my absai. The surnames of the two of them have been changed a long time ago. Traitor patted the top of Daisy's head, and said indulgently and helplessly, "Why are you talking about your own brother like this? If Mom hears you, she'll scold you again." He smiled apologetically at me. "Daisy doesn't think before she speaks. I'll teach her a good lesson when we get back," I said calmly. "She really should be taught well. It won't do for her to be so unreasonable at her age." I turned around and left, and I could still hear Daisy shouting furiously behind me, "Brother! Did Echo just scold me?" I wandered around the first floor but didn't see Phoenix's figure. Finally, having fulfilled my obsession, I found him in the garden. He was sitting alone in a wheelchair. Behind him was the lively atmosphere of people toasting each other. And in front of him was the beautiful scenery of blooming flowers. However, I felt that at this moment, he was the loneliest person in the world. My heart felt a pang of bitterness. I walked over softly and called him with a smile, "Phoenix." He turned his head to look at me, and a trace of surprise flashed in his dim eyes. I squatted down beside his wheelchair, held my face in my hands, and looked up at him. "Why did you come out?" Phoenix asked in a low voice. Instead of answering, I asked. Phoenix. Do you think we have met before? He froze there. His lips moved twice. But he didn't make a sound. I smiled. I didn't really expect to get an answer from him. I stood up and stepped forward to pick a blooming rose. Phoenix curved his lips. This is Daisy's favorite flower. She'll go crazy again if you pick it. I walked back to him and held the flower in front of him. Is it pretty? He nodded slightly. I bent down and inserted the flower beside the armrest of his wheelchair. And smiled cunningly. So. I'm giving it to you. You can take the scolding for me. He was slightly taken aback. After a moment. The corners of his eyes and brows softened. I won't let her scold you. She doesn't have the right to do so either. You really look like a young master. I curved my eyes. Phoenix. I'm really glad that you've returned to your real home. He pursed his lips. And his fingers gently stroked the delicate petals. Thank you. Okay. I want to go in and have some snacks. Do you want to come with me? I asked. Traitor is too good at disguising. He hides his despicable heart under this appearance and has won the admiration of everyone. However, Phoenix is not good at expressing himself. All his hidden and unspeakable thoughts are buried deep in his heart, and no one can peek into them. But I want to pry open his cold shell and touch his soft and sincere heart. Phoenix's mother introduced Phoenix to her noble lady friends. The ladies' eyes looking at Phoenix were filled with pity. Phoenix is really good looking. He really looks like Chilan. Look at how thin the child is. He must have suffered a lot. It's good that he's been found. Chilan should love our Phoenix well in the future. If my child were to get lost outside for even a day, I wouldn't want to let any more. Phoenix's legs can be rehabilitated well later. He'll definitely charm a lot of little girls. I'll reserve it for our Yu first. Then let Phoenix and Yu get to know each other. Come on. His genuine Fei Anki is here. Let's not meddle in other people's business. Echo. Isn't that right? The ladies looked at me and laughed kindly. I stood beside my mother. And my cheeks were burning. I secretly looked up at Phoenix and found that he was also looking at me. His pale and handsome face was actually a bit flushed at this moment. My mother smiled and said some polite words for me. Seeing that we were shy, the ladies stopped talking as well. Traitor. Outside the crowd, his expression was hidden in the darkness. And his expression couldn't be seen clearly. His fists were clenched on both sides. Phoenix's mother quietly pulled me aside and hesitated a bit. Echo. Auntie wants to ask you a favor. I nodded. Auntie. Go ahead. Phoenix has just come home and isn't quite used to it. He has a quiet personality and doesn't talk much to us. I was thinking. Could you spend more time with him? I think. He likes you quite a lot. My face flushed. How? Did you tell? Phoenix's mother smiled gently. I know my own son. Echo. Haven't you noticed? He's always secretly looking at you. I covered my face shyly. Don't worry. Mrs. Phoenix. Phoenix and I are already friends. However, I have a question. I patted my cheeks and said seriously. How did he get his leg injured? Phoenix's mother sighed. Phoenix said that he had a car accident by accident. But I always feel that he's hiding something. I'm still investigating. Before I could speak, there was suddenly a commotion in the crowd not far away. I looked up. In the center of the crowd was Phoenix, who remained silent. Daisy was holding a glass of juice in her hand. And most of it was spilled on Phoenix's pant leg. She said without much apology, sorry. My hand slipped. It was obvious to anyone with eyes what was going on. My head buzzed, and anger welled up in me. I walked over quickly. Traitor's face showed an apologetic look. But there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. I'm sorry. Phoenix. It's all my fault for not watching my sister well. Phoenix's mother's face turned cold and she scolded angrily. Daisy. Apologize to your brother seriously. You're so reckless. Where's the demeanor of a young lady? Is this how your father and I taught you? This was the first time Daisy had been scolded like this in public. She had been doted on by her family for 17 years. But now her mother criticized her again and again for Phoenix's sake. She bit her lip tightly and said crying, I won't. I still don't recognize him as my brother. Daisy pushed through the crowd and ran away. And Traitor quickly chased after her. I squatted down and wiped the water stain on Phoenix's pants with a handkerchief, and asked in a low voice, "Are you okay?" Phoenix looked at me in silence. Suddenly, he smiled very faintly. "I'm fine. Don't worry." A layer of mist suddenly filled my eyes. I couldn't bear to see him smile at me so unfairly. "Phoenix, you look very nice when you smile. But don't smile at me now. I'm very sad." His smile faded, and he let out a soft sigh. "Echo. You're still as kind as before." I could hardly hold back my tears from welling up. I quickly stood up and made way for the butler to push him to the bathroom. "No, Phoenix. I'm not good at all. In the past life, when you were treated like this, I was also one of the onlookers." The next day, I asked Daisy out. I spoke to the little girl gently. "You deliberately spilled that glass of juice yesterday, right?" Daisy bit her lip and said awkwardly, "I just couldn't stand the way everyone was crowding around him. It was my brother who grew up with me after all." "Phoenix is also your brother. Don't you know how much he has suffered? Now that he's back, shouldn't you be happy for him?" I said softly. Daisy twisted her fingers. "But I'm afraid he'll drive my brother away." "But he hasn't done that, has he? He can even tolerate your bad temper. Even though you've angered him again and again. He's never thought of teaching you a lesson." I held her hand and let out a sigh. "Don't treat Phoenix like this anymore. Even if you can't be nice to him, at least don't bully him. Okay?" Daisy lowered her head and didn't say anything. The car suddenly braked sharply. The driver frowned. "Miss, it seems that the car is broken." I looked out the window. "Can it still be driven?" "There's a specialty repair shop ahead. Drive there." The driver tried to start the car again. Fortunately, hadn't fulfilled YFSI. The car could still move. But at the entrance of a motorcycle repair shop not far away, I saw a familiar figure. It was Traitor. Opposite him was a girl. They said a few words. And the girl stepped forward and hugged his waist. My face suddenly turned very ugly. I said in a cold voice, trying to suppress my anger, "Everyone knows that I am Traitor's fiancé. Is he looking down on me by acting like this now?" Daisy really sided with Traitor. She quickly said, "There must be a misunderstanding. Sister Echo. My brother definitely isn't that kind of person." I let out a cold snort, opened the car door, and walked towards the two of them with firm steps. "Who is this?" "Traitor. Aren't you going to introduce her to us?" When Raider saw me, he was taken aback for a moment and quickly pushed the girl away. "Echo. It's not what you think." He wanted to say something. But the next second, when he saw Daisy behind me, he hesitated again. Daisy winked frantically. "Brother. What are you standing there for? Hurry up and explain to Sister Echo." Traitor glanced at the girl. As if choosing his words, "She is just a friend of mine." I sneered. What kind of friend needs to hug and cling to each other in public? Daisy was also very angry, and said to the girl, "Who on earth are you? You must be the one being shameless and pestering my brother." The girl's eyes turned red. And she looked at Traitor pitifully. "Brother. Why don't you tell them that I'm your sister?" "Your real sister?" Daisy's eyes widened. And she suddenly realized the girl's identity. In Daisy's perception, she and Traitor were the closest. And she only recognized Traitor as her brother. But now, Traitor no longer only has her as a sister. This is Traitor's real sister. And she is also the person I naively tried to save from the kidnappers, in my past life. I patted Daisy's shoulder, left the stage to her, and stepped back to watch the show quietly. "Brother. You sneaked out to meet her?" Daisy's eyes widened. Venom wasn't to be outdone. "What's wrong with my brother coming to see me?" "He's not your brother anymore. Traitor's father, who had just finished repairing someone else's car over there, also rushed over and shouted in a loud voice, 'Yeah. What's wrong with my son coming to see his own father? You little girl are so impolite.'" Daisy was so angry that she laughed. "Why should I be polite to you? Traitor has lived in my house for 18 years. He's the closest to me. He shouldn't have hidden this from me. It's wrong of him to hide it and come to see you." Traitor looked at the chaotic scene with a headache. His brows furrowed tightly. I said calmly, It's not convenient for me to get involved in your family affairs. The car is also repaired. Daisy. Let Traitor take you home later. I hid my merits and fame. Hailed a taxi and left, leaving this mess to Traitor. On the way back, I bought a cup of milk tea and also brought a cup for Phoenix. Phoenix took the milk tea and thanked me in a low voice. His fingers were thin and slender, but there were many old scars on them. My gaze trembled, and I averted my eyes. Then, let out a low sigh. I suddenly raised my eyes and caught Phoenix speaking at me right in the act. I beamed and said, "Phoenix, you were peeking at me." He embarrassedly lowered his eyes, and his hand holding the milk tea was trembling. "I'm not stopping you from looking. I'm very generous. If you want to look, just look." I snorted with a laugh. I leaned on the armrest of his wheelchair, bent down, and looked into his eyes. "Phoenix, I found that you're really good looking too." A sudden flush stained his cheeks. His eyelashes quivered slightly, and he didn't dare to look at me. I sat down beside him and chatted with him casually. "I've had breakfast at your home a few times before. I especially like the wontons made by Aunt Hong. I haven't eaten them for a long time." He stared at me and said inferently, "If you want to eat them, just ask Aunt Hong to make them for you again." I smiled. "I'm not the mistress of your Phoenix family. How can I have the nerve to ask?" Phoenix fell silent then. On Monday morning, I deliberately got up a bit late and rushed out the door just in time. Mom called out behind me, "Echo, you haven't had breakfast yet." I replied loudly, "Someone will bring it for me." When I got to the classroom, sure enough, I saw a lunchbox in my drawer. It looked very familiar. It was from the Phoenix family. I immediately turned around to look at Phoenix. His gaze met mine, and there was a faint smile in his eyes, which quickly shifted away. I felt delighted in my heart. I opened the lunchbox, and it was the wontons made by Aunt Hong that I had been longing for. "You really do care about me, Phoenix. You sly and reserved guy." I walked up to him and smiled modestly. "I just said it casually the other day. I didn't expect you to take it to heart." "Thank you, Phoenix." His eyes were gentle and soft as he looked at me in silence. My heart seemed to be filled with a lake of water, with ripples surging. "I have to take it slow and not push him," I thought to myself. "One day, he will open his heart to me." Phoenix and Traitor's birthdays were on the same day, and the Phoenix family held a grand birthday banquet for the two of them. Under Traitor's coaxing and apologizing offensive, Daisy had long since stopped being angry with Traitor. She said to me proudly, "My brother still loves me the most. His ugly sister can't compare to me at all." I listened absently, my eyes searching for Phoenix's figure in the hall. Traitor was wearing a white suit, looking confident and elegant, with an impeccable smile. Phoenix was dressed in a black suit, and with his cold and unruly face, it set off his mysterious and noble temperament. My gaze was involuntarily drawn to Phoenix, and my heart was fluttering like a little deer. Phoenix's mother prepared the same gift for her two sons, a Patek Philippe wristwatch. Daisy took out a gift box, and inside was a starry sky tie. She smiled playfully and handed the tie to Traitor. "Brother, happy birthday to you. You will always be my favorite brother." Traitor stroked her hair. "Thank you, Daisy. You will always be my dearest sister too." People around were talking about the deep affection between the brother and sister. Phoenix's mother winked. "Daisy, what about your gift for your brother Phoenix?" Daisy pouted. "I don't have one." Although she didn't speak rudely to Phoenix anymore, she still didn't regard him as her brother. I looked at Phoenix, who was silent, and my heart ached as if pricked by a needle. When Traitor was learning horseback riding in the spacious racecourse, Phoenix was working part-time outside to earn his pocket money. When Traitor was playing golf with the upper-class aristocracy, Phoenix had his hands smeared with engine oil in the narrow auto repair shop. When Traitor was learning to play the piano with a professional teacher, Phoenix got new wounds on his hands every day. That was the glorious life that had been taken away from Phoenix. The life that should have belonged to him. What gift will Miss Echo prepare for her fiancé? For young Master Traitor's coming-of-age ceremony at 18. The gift must be unique, right? Traitor and Echo are really a perfect match. A beautiful couple. The celebrities were whispering aside. Under the watchful eyes of everyone. I took out a vintage audio system and gave it to Traitor. It was just the kind of ordinary audio system that could be bought on Taobao. There was a moment of silence all around. The corner of Traitor's mouth twitched. Probably this was the first time in his 18-year life that he had received such an inexpensive gift. He forced a smile that could be called a show of surprise. Thank you, Echo. I like it very much. I had a hard time holding back my laughter. I'm glad you like it. All the popular young fresh meat stars should come and see Traitor's textbook like acting skills. I took out a delicate gift box again. Inside was a limited edition necklace. And the pendant was a moon. Phoenix. Happy 18th birthday. I wish you happiness every day. I gave it to Phoenix with a beaming smile. Goodness. This. Could it be that Echo mixed up the gifts for the two of them? This is a limited edition couple's necklace. There is also a women's version. Which is the one that Echo is wearing around her neck? Miss Echo's intentions are very clear. She obviously has a crush on young Master Phoenix. Can't you all see that? Phoenix looked at me. His eyes deep. He said in a low voice. Thank you. At the entrance of the restroom. Traitor's eyes were red. Echo. You said before that you didn't want to be in a relationship. But now. What's your intention towards Phoenix? Do you like him? I thought for a moment. If I were to confront him now. I didn't know what this crazy person would do after being provoked. I could only try to placate him for now. I stood on tiptoe and leaned close to his ear and said, Don't you dislike Phoenix? When he falls for my sweet talking and persuasive tactics, I'll give him a devastating blow and completely drive him out of the Phoenix family and be with you. Isn't that a good plan? There was a clatter. The sound of a necklace falling to the ground. At that moment, my heart turned cold. As if I had fallen into an ice cellar. I turned around and saw that Phoenix was sitting in a wheelchair. His deep eyes showing no emotion. I didn't care about Traitor anymore. I quickly picked up the necklace and chased after Phoenix. Brother. Why are you here? Hurry up and cut the cake. Daisy passed me by and dragged Traitor away. I silently chased after Phoenix and came to the garden. His eyebrows and eyes were coated with a layer of cold light under the night. I said uneasily. Phoenix. The corners of his thin lips curled slightly. And his words were cold. Echo. Is it fun to play with me like this? I squatted at his feet. Feeling a bit flustered. I'm sorry. Phoenix's eyes were like deep pools. And he smiled self-deprecating lie. You're not wrong. None of you are wrong. It's me who's wrong. I shouldn't have been here. I stared at him blankly. My heart taking sharply. Feeling lost. Phoenix. This is for the best. Hate me. And you won't kneel and humiliate yourself for me in the future. I'm really sorry. Phoenix. It's your birthday today. But I made you angry. I lowered my head. And my vision was a bit blurred. Echo. Phoenix's angry voice sounded in a suppressed tone. Aren't you going to explain something? Even if it's a lie. It's okay. I suddenly raised my head and looked into his eyes. I sniffled. Have you seen Infernal Affairs? Phoenix was caught off guard by my sudden change of topic. He frowned. Yes. I have. I said seriously. I'm the police officer who's undercover among the bad guys. Phoenix's expression looked like he was holding back his emotions. Can you understand me? I was just speaking insincerely just now. I definitely didn't mean to hurt you. I looked at him eagerly. After a long time. His stern eyebrows relaxed. And he let out a sigh. Okay. Since you said so. I believe you. I blinked my eyes. Letting the evening wind blow away the thin layer of tears in my eyes. And forced a smile. Phoenix. You're so easy to please. He pursed his lips. And there was a deep affection hidden in his eyes as he looked at me. Then he raised his hand. And the back of his hand gently touched my cheek. Unlike his icy exterior. His hand was very warm. I just smiled and looked at him. Holding his hand. I quietly asked the butler to bring up the cake that I had prepared specifically for Phoenix. The lights went out. The candles flickered. And I looked at Phoenix's gentle eyebrows and eyes and softly sang the birthday song for him. I put the necklace back into his palm. Keep it safe. Don't lose it. I spent a lot of effort getting it. His palm tightened. His Adam's apple moved slightly. And he stared at the star pendant around my neck for a long time without looking away. The annual social dance party of our school was starting to be prepared again. Daisy was pulling Traitor and looking at the dress samples on her phone. Brother. You'll look really good in this suit. You choose. I'm fine with anything. Brother trusts your taste. Traitor said casually. But his eyes kept looking in my direction. After Daisy chose one for him, she asked me again. Sister Echo. Which one do you like? I looked at Phoenix, who was pretending to flip through a magazine not far away but was actually peeking at me. And the corners of my mouth curved slightly. I'm not going to participate. Daisy was anxious. Sister Echo. If you don't participate, who will my brother dance with? Are you going to give him away to someone else? I said mournfully. Who said your brother is going? Ask your brother Phoenix and see if he's going. Traitor's face suddenly changed. And his expression turned ugly. But I stared intently at Phoenix. Phoenix didn't hold my gaze for long before he gave in. He said in a low voice. I'll go. In order to attend the dance party as I asked, my dance partner, Mr. Phoenix, was persuaded by me and Phoenix's mother to go to the rehabilitation training center. He didn't have the conditions for rehabilitation training when he was in the Traitor family. After returning to the Phoenix family, he gave up on himself and never mentioned rehabilitation training at all. I hooked my finger with Phoenix's and asked him softly. Are you afraid of the pain? He looked at me tenderly. No. I'm not. I smiled. When you come out, as a reward for completing the task, you can make a request of me. Go ahead. Come on. I'll be waiting for you outside. Phoenix raised his hand, paused above my head for a while, and then casually withdrew it. I couldn't help but laugh and took the initiative to rub my head against his palm. Do you need some energy? I'll give it to you. Don't be afraid. His cheeks turned slightly red, and there was a faint smile in his eyes. The rehabilitation therapist helped Phoenix stand up. His two long legs were shaking violently. I turned around, feeling a pang of sadness in my heart. He probably didn't want me to see him in such an embarrassed state. My phone suddenly rang. It was a message from Traitor, asking me to go for a coffee. I frowned and ignored it. But after a while, he still found his way here. He was determined to have a talk with me. I looked back at Phoenix, wanting to say something to him. But he had his back to me and didn't see me. I thought for a moment, let's go. Traitor clenched his jaw. And his eyes were paranoid. I don't want to see you getting close to him anymore. I can coexist with Phoenix. Echo, Echo. Don't do this for me anymore. Echo, Echo. Be my girlfriend. There was endless affection shining in his eyes. We have a marriage contract. Sooner or later, you'll be my wife. There's no difference between doing it earlier or later. I pondered for a moment and nodded. That makes sense. A hint of secret joy flashed in his eyes. I raised the corners of my lips, but it has never been you who has a marriage contract with me. You're just an imposter, young master. What does that have to do with me? His eyes changed, as if he didn't recognize me. And his tone was full of pain. Echo. Do you really want to treat me like this? I said calmly, if you're sensible. Just be an invisible person in the Phoenix family, and don't overestimate your abilities and challenge their blood relationship. I returned to the door of the rehabilitation room. Phoenix had already come out. He was sitting in a wheelchair. His handsome face was covered with sweat, and his lips were pale. I smiled and greeted him. But Phoenix didn't even look at me, leaving me with just a cold back. I was slightly stunned. What was going on? The butler winked at me, and I looked at his lip movements in confusion. When you left, the young master accidentally fell. I was shocked, and my heart felt a little bitter. Phoenix. Stop. I shouted, pretending to be angry. His back stiffened, and he obediently stopped. I examined his expression, grabbed his hand and took a look. The palm of his hand was a bit red. I lifted up his trouser leg again. There was a slight swelling and redness at his knee. He frowned and reached out to pull me away. Echo, Echo. Is the reward you mentioned still valid? His voice was low. My eyes lit up, of course. He looked at me deeply with his eyes. Then let your sweet words and gestures not disappear so quickly. Even if it's fake, I really need it. My heart was stung again. And I forced a smile. Phoenix. It's not fake. Just now Raider came to me. He still has his heart set on it and wanted me to be his girlfriend. I refused him immediately. Phoenix's expression was a bit surprised. He probably didn't expect that I would bring it up on my own initiative. After all, you're my genuine fiancé, right? I held his face in my hands and smiled. Daisy has been complaining to me recently. She found that Traitor has been secretly transferring money to his biological sister and buying her gifts. I smiled and comforted her. After all, you're not his only sister. After being separated for 18 years, it's only natural for him to be nice to his biological sister. Sister Echo. Since this isn't happening to you, you don't understand how I feel. Daisy was feel wronged and unable to vent in her heart and was unhappy that I was making excuses for Traitor. I shook my head. I'm just being understanding and thinking of others. So I got ready and went to show kindness to my first love's biological sister. I bought a beautiful dress for Venom. Looking at herself in the mirror, her eyes gradually became proud and confident. The next day, I took her to the dance studio at school. Traitor was practicing dance steps with Daisy. Traitor. Your sister said she wanted to see you. So I brought her here. I smiled gracefully. The expression on Traitor's face the moment he saw Venom was really wonderful. As if he had just swallowed a fly. The classmates asked one after another who she was. Venom said proudly, I'm Traitor's sister. His biological sister. Traitor's expression was cold. But Venom thought her brother was extremely cool. She hugged Traitor's arm and acted cautiously. Brother. Why haven't you gone back to see Mom and Dad? Phoenix isn't there anymore. And no one helps Dad repair cars. He can't manage it alone. So what? Do you want me to go back and repair cars with him? Traitor sneered. The classmates around whispered, so Traitor's family repairs cars? Poor Phoenix. He worked for their family for so many years for nothing. And yet their son has been living a life of luxury in the Phoenix family. Daisy's eyes were red. My brother won't go to your house to repair cars. You're dreaming. Venom said aggressively. What do you mean? He's my brother. The biological son of my mom and dad. Who do you think you are? Traitor shouted coldly, stop arguing. Both of you. Daisy stared at Traitor blankly and suddenly burst into tears. Traitor. She has scolded me like this. And you won't let me scold her back? Since childhood, Traitor had never been harsh on her. Now that he had lost his temper with her for the first time because of his biological sister, how could Daisy not feel wronged? Fine. Since you're her brother, I don't want you to be my brother anymore. I coughed and cleared my throat. Mr. Phoenix. Now I need to check your rehabilitation progress. Okay. Phoenix looked at me with a smile on the corner of his lips. And then asked the butler for a walking stick. I was dissatisfied and pinched his face. Don't you believe that I can support you? He raised his eyebrows slightly. I believe you. I just don't want to make you so tired. I carefully helped him stand up, hugged his waist, and teased him with a smile. Can you walk? Take a couple of steps and let me see. His legs didn't shake as much as before. There was some strength in his feet, and he could slowly move one or two steps. I was just about to praise him for his progress. A harsh voice sounded behind me. Such a grown-up is still learning to walk here. Aren't you ashamed? It was Venom. My eyes turned slightly cold. And I understood clearly in my heart. She could enter the Phoenix family. So someone must have allowed and acquiesced. I just didn't know if it was the order of Phoenix's mother or Daisy. Traitor. Who was chasing after her? Said in a cold voice, Venom. Who taught you to speak like this? I gave him a cold sideways glance. Traitor. You'd better discipline your sister well. Not everyone can enter the Phoenix family and speak recklessly in front of Phoenix. If your sister doesn't know the rules, it will be you who will be ashamed in the end. Venom's face stiffened, and she let out a cold snort. What young master? He was just a car repairman who ate and drank for free in my house. When I heard this, anger welled up in me. But a warm hand stoked between my eyebrows and smoothed out my furrowed brows. My heart throbbed for no reason. I looked up and saw that Phoenix wasn't angry. Instead, he looked at me gently with a smile. Echo, don't be angry. He coaxed me in a low voice. Traitor stood aside and watched me and Phoenix in silence. His gaze was cold, like that of a poisonous snake. Suddenly, he smiled gently again and looked towards the eaves. Mom. Daisy. I also turned my head to look. Phoenix's mother and Daisy were standing under the eaves. I don't know when. Phoenix's mother had completely lost her usual kind demeanor. Her gaze towards Traitor's family siblings was emotionless. Daisy's face was displeased, and she said coldly, Venom, I advise you to watch your mouth. If you say one more unpleasant word to my brother, I'll have you thrown out. I secretly laughed and gently tickled Phoenix's back, whispering, Hey, your sister has grown up. Phoenix's body trembled, and he let out a muffled groan. He lowered his eyes to look at me, and his eyes were burning hot and deep. Traitor, you and your sister go back home and stay for a while, Phoenix's mother said in a serious tone. Mom. Traitor couldn't believe it. He shook off Venom's hand and rushed forward. Phoenix's mother didn't look at him. She smiled and said to us, Echo and Phoenix, come in and have afternoon tea later. There's the blueberry cake that Echo likes the most, and the osmanthus cake that Phoenix likes. Mom, you're being partial. Is there the strawberry mousse that I like? Daisy hugged Phoenix's mother's arm and swayed it. Phoenix's mother helplessly poked her forehead. Yes, Yeving so felt my obsession. Your brother knows you like it and specifically asked Aunt Han to prepare it for you. Daisy blushed and glanced at Phoenix, and said awkwardly, Thank you. Brother. Phoenix was silent for a moment and then gave a faint hum. I stood on tiptoe and kissed Phoenix on the face, smiling, You're quite good at being a brother. Phoenix insisted on sending me to the gate of the villa. Just stay here and don't move. I patted my chest. Don't worry. I won't be abducted. Oops. I spoke too soon. As soon as I walked out of the corner, I was pulled into an embrace by a hand. Traitor's eyes were red, and he lowered his head to force a kiss on me. Before the security guards could act, I slapped Traitor across the face. Traitor. I don't like you anymore. Maybe I liked you before, but that bit of liking was really insignificant. Don't pester me anymore. The security guards rushed over and subdued Traitor in a few moves. Phoenix gripped the armrest of the wheelchair tightly. His face was as white as a sheet. He lowered his eyes, filled with deep self-loathing. Echo. Look. I can't even stand up and give him a punch. Do you really think I need you to do such a trivial thing? I can send him flying with just one punch. I stroked Phoenix's hair and whispered in his ear. Let me tell you secretly. I've learned taekwondo. He put his arm around my waist, and I sat on his lap as a natural movement. I closed my eyes and leaned my face towards him. Well, I'll give you a chance to comfort me. I waited for a long time, but there was no movement. Just as I was about to open my eyes awkwardly, I felt a warmth on my face. He gently raised his hand and caressed my cheek tenderly and nostalgically for a while. I'll try a little harder. He seemed to be talking to himself, and also seemed to be making a promise. My heart softened, but I deliberately put on a stern face. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Am I that harsh? I didn't ask you to stand up right away on the day of the dance. As long as you can stand up at our engagement banquet. I kissed his forehead and suddenly smiled. Soon, let out a low sigh. The day of the dance arrived. I was wearing a beautiful dress, holding up the hem of my skirt, and holding Phoenix's hand. With light steps, Phoenix was sitting in a wheelchair. The black suit set off his cold and charming temperament. His gaze always followed me tenderly. Traitor, who was always the center of attention, rushed over in a hurry. In the sight of everyone, he rushed straight to my side. Echo. Something has happened to my sister. The kidnappers are asking for money and said they'll kill her if we call the police. He lowered his voice, looking anxious. I also became nervous. Which sister of yours? Traitor's eyes dodged for a moment. It's Daisy. He knew that if he said it was Venom, I would definitely not go. I curled my lips and called out towards the back of the stage, "Daisy! Your brother is calling you." Daisy came out in a gorgeous dress. She didn't even look at Traitor and snorted, "He's no longer my brother." Before the dance today, Traitor went out with her. But he made an excuse and left her alone in his parents' car repair shop. From that moment on, he was no longer the brother she knew. Traitor's face looked ugly. "Daisy. I said I was going to buy something. And when I came back, I couldn't find you. Why don't you believe your brother?" I sneered and interrupted him, "Daisy is fine. Isn't she? What's wrong with her?" Traitor couldn't pretend anymore. He said stiffly in a low voice, "Something has happened to Venom. She's been kidnapped." I said lazily, "Venom isn't my sister. What does it have to do with me?"